Okay, right. So last video I was explaining to you how Paul almost got whacked by a great white shark, and that seal got taken out within seconds of hitting the water. Talking about water. Anyway, we had a great time. We worked out there for 3 months. It was hard work. Um, showering in bird shit water every day and living on the island and being out from daybreak to from dusk to dawn, or dawn to dusk, and it was hard work. However, the results were very promising. So, unfortunately, the barrier is still not operational. It's not in the water. They're not using it, and it's because of the complications. Well, there's different reasons, but it's a complicated machine or electronic device to use in the ocean. Anyway, that doesn't matter. The thing is, the thing worked. But at the same time, Norman Starkey Marconi, as we call him and Graham Charter, who I mentioned before, was the director of the Sharks Board. they were developing a personal shark repellent, electronic shark repellent, and the test model was probably about this long. It was a Perspex tube like that, and had all the electronics in it, and a battery pack, and everything they needed, And coming out of it was there were two electrodes, like cables. So one electrode would go down and fasten to your fin or your foot or whatever, and then the other electrode would be connected to your arm. And then in this hand or in the hand of the electrode, didn't matter, there was a little thing about this big, also a plexiglass tube, sealed, everything sealed, of course. And if you turned it, it had a mercury switch. So if you held it like that, the machine was off. And if you turned it like that, so you hold like that, it's off, and you turn like this, then the mercury switch would kick in and the machine would be on. The personal electronic barrier would come on. So after we did all the testing with the big barrier, Graham Charter and the rest of the boys, they went back to Durban, and I went back to Cape Town. And then we got contacted by National Geographic. And National Geographic wanted to do a documentary called Shark Shocker. And this was very soon after was it Shark Shocker? Yes. In fact, they might have been the first documentary we ever did, Shark Shocker. At the same time, Discovery Channel were also dealing with us on another documentary called African Shark Safari. And this all related to the great white shark being protected, and our team being the ones that got the great white shark protected. So suddenly, we went from this little white shark research operation that nobody knew about to the top of the food chain, the top of the pyramid in the world. We were suddenly the most famous people in the world working with great white sharks, just like that, overnight, once we got it protected. It was unexpected, and of course it was not our objective, or not our, what's the right word for it, our agenda, but it is what it is, and that's what happened. So a little while later, the team from National Geographic arrived, and it's none other than Ron and Valerie Taylor, the legendary Australian couple. Ron has passed away, unfortunately, but Ron and Valerie Taylor were on Blue Water White Death, for goodness sake. I mean, these are legends. And they were the people I'd been reading about in all the books growing up. And they'd also worked on Jaws. I mean, they knew Steven Spielberg, and I mean, you're talking about Peter Gimbel and what's his name, a crazy crusty guy, Peter Gimbel. Anyway, it doesn't matter, I can't remember that, it'll come to me. But these guys, Ron and Valerie Taylor, worked on Jaws, and they worked on Blue Water White Death, two of the most famous white shark The one is a documentary, another one is a movie. The one's a docudrama, another one's a movie. So they're super famous people when it comes to working with sharks of all species. Anyway, I can't believe that they're coming out to work with us. So I'm excited as hell. So their crew rocks up, and it's Ron and Val, and we're all heading out to Dyer Island to do work at Dyer Island. So my father organizes a 45-foot, sort of a mothership, if you want to call it, a 45-foot old fishing trawler that was converted into a home kind of thing, like a liveaboard boat, and it's owned by a guy called Ken Bruin. I can't remember his wife's name or his girlfriend's name. And so there's Ken on the boat and his girlfriend, and then his crewman, who was as rough as a grizzly's ass. I mean, this guy is as rough as they came. And then it was Ron and Val, and then Valerie's nephew, and I really can't remember his name either. Super nice guy, he's out there. And then it's Norman Starkey, Marconi, and Graham Charter, they're part of the crew. And then a very well-known underwater filmmaker or videographer, well, those days was film, Gordon Hiles, and then a very good friend of mine, best man at his wedding, Mike Hughes. And anyway, so we all out there. And then also PJ van der Walt, the guy that first started promoting the conservation of, or promoting great white shark diving tours in South Africa. So PJ van der Walt rocks up, and then there's another guy called George Askew. Now, I didn't really know much about him. I think he just was desperately trying to get in front of the camera. That doesn't matter. So we go out to Dyer Island, and we got sharks cooking. We can basically walk on the sharks' backs from one island to the other, from Giza Rock to Dyer Island and back. I mean, that's how chocker the sharks are. They're full of sharks, a lot of great white sharks. And Ron and Valerie Taylor were blown away. They've been working in the Neptune Islands and stuff, and out of Port Lincoln, and they'd never seen so many great white sharks in one place. We were cooking out there. So now we had done all the testing of the barrier. So Graham and Marconi, they were there, and now it was time to test this personal white shark, or the shark deterrent, the personal thing that you would somehow eventually they would narrow it down, and I think eventually they called it shark off or something like that. But this was the original, the original rough model. So we're out at the island, and at first Valerie, we've got a big cage in the back of the boat. So we're working when we're doing the documentary, and we're doing interviews and all the rest of it. And we got a cage, aluminium cage, floating off the back of the Gay Jane. That was the boat's name, the 45-foot converted trawler. And our boat was there and tied up next to it in the Gay Jane. So we were all working off the Gay Jane. And so eventually Valerie goes into the water to test this thing. So she's got one electrode attached to her foot, and she's got another electrode in her hand. But because the aluminium, or aluminum as Americans say, in the water, she's shocking the shit out of herself. I mean, this thing is roasting her in the cage. So every time she turns the mercury switch on, she gets shocked and fried in the cage. So we can't use the cage, and it's interfering with how it transmits into the water. So the sharks don't give a rat's ass. They're bumping up against the cage while Valerie's electrocuting herself and Ron in the cage, because they're the stars of the show. And anyway, so my dad comes up with some plan, and we put it onto we actually attached this thing to a bait. And we got the bait out in the water, and as the shark comes up to the bait, my father would say, hit it, which means it would be switch on. And the shark would come up and actually have its mouth open, and we'd switch on that, Marconi would switch it on, and that shark would go and disappear. shoot away. So the thing worked. And, so we're working day after day. We're getting this documentary done, and it's very exciting, and working out there with legends, And eventually, we decide, okay, now it's time to do a real test of this thing, which means out of the cage. So free diving with these great white sharks, but we weren't going to do it on the surface. It was all scuba. Now the channel, Shark Alley, is crawling with great white sharks. The visibility is murky. It's no more than about 5 meters, like 15 feet or something like that. And Valerie is going to use, now she's got the thing attached to her back, this electronic shark repellent. And she's got one electrode on her foot and another on her arm, and she's got the mercury switch. So she's going to go in the water, and Ron and her are going to stay quite close together. And when the sharks come cruising in, which they literally did, she would then switch it on and see if it chases the sharks away. So she goes into the water, and Ron goes into the water with her. Mike Hughes goes into the water with an aluminium pole as a protection diver, and PJ van der Walt goes into the water as well, also with a pole to push the sharks off if it gets out of hand down there. And my father's on top giving instructions, and I've got one guy, Ken Screwman, he's chumming, and I'm working the bait lines because we want to keep the sharks active. So the divers are basically in the water 10 meters from the boat on the bottom of the channel, and we working the sharks to keep them active and interested from the top. So what happens down there, the sharks are literally swimming between them. So they're in a group down there, and they've got their poles, and the footage is all in the documentary. And you see these great white sharks swimming between them and coming right up behind Valerie, And Valerie and Ron Taylor had never been outside of a cage with great white sharks before. So this was a new experience for them. They were very excited that we were able to provide this experience for them to actually go outside the cage. But anyway, you see on the footage, Valerie's got this thing like this, and she's switching on and off, and the sharks are swimming around and scooting off and coming back and swimming over them. And there's Mike and PJ, with their 4-meter aluminium poles, trying to keep the sharks from eating them. And it's exciting stuff. Nobody had ever done this before. It was the first time it had ever been done in the world. So they're in the water for probably like 40 minutes or something. They're in the water forever. And eventually they come out the water, and they're all safe, and nobody's been eaten, and nobody's been bitten in half. And at one time, there was one moment where they were in the water in a group, and there were literally 5 great white sharks between them and around them. And I'm talking about big sharks. Great white sharks will rip your leg off or bite you in half. And anyway, so they come out the water, and Ron and Valerie Taylor are so excited, and PJ's on fire, and Mike's on fire. And it's an extraordinary feeling to have. I'll explain it to you from my own perspective. Anyway, so they come out the water, and we get them onto the dive platform, and then they're standing on the dive platform, up against on the gunnel of the stern of the Gay Jane, and they've been interviewed now. And Valerie is saying, this has been a dream for all her life. I mean, this is a woman that worked on Jaws, worked on Blue Water White Death, has been doing so much white shark work, and she's never been out the cage with great white sharks. And she's thanking us, and she's so humble. And Ron, Ron got attacked. No, Ron didn't get attacked by a great white shark. I'm thinking about Rodney Fox. But Ron Taylor, he's had experience with great white sharks that have buzzed him while he's out spearfishing. But Valerie, is so excited. And she's just saying, thank you, this is an experience of a lifetime. They can't believe they did it. And there's Graham and Norman. And how did the barrier work? How did the electronic protection work? And Valerie's saying, it was fantastic. And we got it all on camera. Who was the underwater cameraman? Oh, Gordon Hiles was also in the water. Gordon Hiles was in the water filming all of this. And Ron was filming it. So Ron and Gordon were filming this. So Valerie's saying how it worked, but the sharks were coming very close. and every time they came really, literally touching distance, she'd put this thing on and they'd swim off. And so according to her, the thing worked. And anyway, so we did the documentary, and the documentary aired on National Geographic. But here's the thing, and this is interesting. So Norman, after they come out the water, Norman or Marconi, not Norman, I'm thinking of the deputy director of the Sharks Board, Norman Wynn. But anyway, Marconi takes this thing off Valerie. He takes it off a dive thing, and he goes to the front of the boat and he starts looking at it to check how it's working, and to check the mercury switch and just make sure everything's still fine and the battery power. And I walk up to him, and he's busy fiddling with it, and I can see he's got this kind of like confused look on his face. And I say to him, Norman, what's happening? So this thing worked. Now we've become good friends because we've been working together for 3 months or something on the barrier. So even I became good mates. And he's like this. He's probably got an IQ of like 170, and he looks like a little bit crazy, and beard and everything. So he looks at me and he says, "It didn't work once. Nothing failed completely." And he shows me there's a wire inside the thing that's off, that accidentally somehow became unplugged before they put it on to Valerie and put it in the water. So the thing wasn't working. They had no protection down there whatsoever. But it just shows you that the great white sharks were curious and interested. And, yes, Mike and PJ had to push some of the sharks away because they became too curious. But none of the sharks tried to attack them down there. None of the sharks tried to eat them down there. They were just very curious. They were inquisitive and curious, and coming up to examine what these weird, funny creatures were doing in their world, because they weren't used to bubbly, noisy things with yellow and pink and blue and all sorts of colors on them. And they're Valerie flipping the thing on and off, and it's not even working. So, yeah, nobody even knows. No, this is the first time anybody knows about it because we kept it a secret. It was a secret between myself, Len Compagno, my father, Graham Charter, and Marconi. And nobody else knew about this for years. And now you know about it. And the reason I'm telling the story is actually because I spoke to PJ van der Walt the other day. Now, PJ van der Walt, as I say, he was in the water with them to protect them. And only the other day did he find out, because I told him, that the machine actually was not working. He was still under the impression that the machine was working, and it wasn't working. Anyway, catch you on the next one.